Very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Let's take a look at some of your headlines and delve right in. It is the second day of the ANC's eThekwini Regional Conference in KwaZulu-Natal. Further afield, Pakistan's MPs will elect a new Prime Minister on Monday. All right, this is the week ahead. Let's take a look at what we can expect for the coming week. Earlier on today, in fact, spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation, Mzwanele Manyi, held a media briefing. This was ahead of the former president's court appearance tomorrow. Manyi said the former president will pursue private prosecution of the lead prosecutor in his trial, Advocate Billy Downer.
The foundation confirms, first and foremost, that His Excellency President Zuma, contrary to various speculations, will indeed be at the Pietermaritzburg court tomorrow, 11th of April. He is going to be there. Secondly, His Excellency President Zuma, through his legal team, will be responding to the supplementary affidavit served by the NPA, where they seek to introduce new evidence on the events of the last few days. So what was the announcement? Two things. One, in his response, His Excellency President Zuma will remind the court that he has long anticipated that the NPA would refuse to prosecute one of their own even after his recent retirement. He therefore informed the court in his previous affidavits that he had instructed his legal team to institute private prosecution proceedings against Advocate Downer with immediate effect, subject obviously to all the required administrative protocols, and as soon as NPA announces its expected bias decision. The instruction will now be put into operation in the next few days. So you can take it from me that President Zuma has decided that the only way to deal with Downer is through private prosecution. So wheels are being set in motion to see to it that a private prosecution happens. The second announcement, the foundation wishes to announce that the legal team of His Excellency President Zuma has filed for his reconsideration application to the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. The foundation is forever grateful to the efficiency and diligence of the legal team of His Excellency President Zuma, because as you know, that once the ruling is made, you have 30 days to respond. But this very dedicated, resolute team of His Excellency President Zuma has already done all that needed to be done within a short space of time. We conclude by saying all President Zuma is looking for really is his day in court in a fair trial.
All right, on the back of this, let's focus on some legal matters for the week ahead. Tomorrow, the men accused of killing former Bafana goalkeeper Senzo Meyiwa is back in court. The Judicial Service Commission has decided to advise President Cyril Ramaphosa not to appoint a judge president at the KwaZulu-Natal High Court Division at this stage. And an urgent court bid to interdict Parliament from proceeding with the impeachment process is obviously also underway. Perhaps for this and more, let's be joined by legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala. Very good afternoon to you, Mpumelelo. Thanks for joining us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you, and also good afternoon to your viewers.
Let's start off with the press briefing that just concluded by the spokesperson for the Jacob Zuma Foundation ahead of the former president's court appearance tomorrow. I just wonder, in terms of his options, what are his chances of winning this time round? What are his options at this point? Does the former president have a strong case as we speak?
In terms of private prosecution, there could still be a few things which have to be done before that particular process is successful. Just remember, the NPA has to say you are not prosecuting at all, and then it has to issue you with a certificate in terms of saying you can go and do your own private prosecution. But 90% of the time, they would say, please make sure that you have all the fees and also any damages that may accrue, you are going to pay for them, but you must show us that you just in case you are not successful in your private prosecution, and at the end of the day, you are ordered to pay the damages. Once that particular certificate has been issued, only then can you go and consider this private prosecution process in which the foundation is saying that the former president will engage in. So I don't think which is something which is going to happen anytime soon. It may take a bit of time before that particular process occurs. But let's also remember that what governs the way in which court matters are handled, especially in criminal matters, is the Criminal Procedure Act. It will tell you under what circumstances should this private prosecution be instituted, what are the requirements that should be followed, but most importantly, it has no bearing on the case which is going to start tomorrow. Because unless there's an application for postponement, which is very substantial, and it shows that there's a reasonable delay that must accrue to this particular matter, then the chances of the trial the parties being instructed to continue with the trial are quite high.
All right, thank you for that clarity, Mpumelelo. Let's take a look at some of the other stories also coming through for this week. Out of the 4 candidates selected for the Constitutional Court judge post, who do you think is more likely to bag these 2 positions? Perhaps why?
I would say it could be quite difficult because all the candidates that were interviewed are much qualified and do they have the appropriate experience in order to qualify to be appointed. What most is a bit puzzling though is the number of individuals that were appointed, that were recommended. Ordinarily, for the number of court judges that are required to be inserted, you need about 5 candidates to be recommended to the president. Now the president is put in a very in a predicament in this case because it's only 4. Then the question would be: do you break away from the norm that has been there, that has been utilized all this time, or are you going to say, in order for me to be safe, to continue with the practice that's been occupied by the JSC previously, let me stick with only appointing 1 candidate? But in my opinion, all the candidates that have been recommended are more or less up to the task, and they'll be able to execute their duties as justices of the Court.
Well, it seems like it's a tough decision for the president, and we're obviously wishing him all the best as we await that announcement. But let's also look at some of the reasons for the JSC having dropped acting Judge David Unterhalter's name from the list. Eventually leaving only 4 candidates as we speak.
I think during the interviews, that particular mention of the error and that mission of the error, and in some of the commissioners, they were saying, you don't commit such an error within the level of a justice that is going to sit in the Constitutional Court. One should know that these are the type of matters that I've dealt with before. I've seen these particular cases, I've seen these particular facts being presented to me before. It's not likely that you're going to forget these factors at such an early stage. So one important fact is that they were then saying, we can't forgive you for that particular error. To us, it is a rookie error that shouldn't occur within the level of the Court, and on that basis, we are not going to recommend you for you to be recommended as one of the candidates. I think it is quite unfortunate. Maybe one could even say that JSC is applying a very hard stance when it comes to the qualifications and the criteria in which or the level of competence in which it wants the Constitutional Court judges to have. And some may say maybe they were a bit too strict. It was an honest mistake, openly admitted. It was not hidden in any particular manner. And maybe they should have focused more on the prejudice that would have been suffered by the parties involved, and whether when it was identified, could they then go back for the order to be reconsidered, or are there other avenues in which that particular sort of impulse or procedural unfairness could be resolved? But I think the JSC is a bit showing us the stance in which they are going to take from now on moving forward, in terms of saying we want accuracy, we want a person who knows their story. We do not want a person who's going to commit minor mistakes at a position or at a level of a justice of the Court.
All right, let's move on to other legal matters. Mpumelelo, obviously the Public Protector coming back into the spotlight. Public Protector Mgobane last week lodging an urgent court bid to interdict Parliament from proceeding with the impeachment process. And now, I wonder, in your opinion, why do you think the Parliamentary Committee has decided to move ahead with the impeach process despite the rescission application put forth or applied for by the Public Protector?
I think the decision that came earlier that was in their favor bolstered their confidence in terms of saying we're moving ahead with this particular process. Let's also remember this particular process was not limited or linked to any court proceedings. You have a constitutional provision that says that we as Parliament have a particular duty, and you can go ahead and impeach or remove a Chapter 9 institution head if we have set up those particular platforms. What was missing in this case was the platform in terms of doing it. It has never been done before in South Africa. So they're basically inventing a new procedure in which, in that particular intervention, they're trying as much to say, we want it to be as fair as possible, to be legal compliant as much as possible. So we are going to continue with this groundwork so that if a decision comes back within the ConCourt after the rescission application has been made and it has been dismissed, they would hope that it's going to be dismissed, then we are more than ready to start with this particular process. We are racing against time because we want to make sure that we review the conduct of this particular public protector within her term. But what may be a problem moving forward is that let's remember that there are only 3 instances in which the public protector can be found wanting. Firstly, if there are any allegations of misconduct. Secondly, if the public protector is incapacitated from doing her job, or it's the inability to do her job in the most professional manner. Now, if you don't fit in, or your allegations don't fit into those 3, the chances of success are going to be very minimal. Now, let's take that and guide against the provisions or maybe the submission that will be made by the public protector. She would say, under my leadership, we have achieved a clean audit, not once, twice. Under my leadership, there are a number of reports that have been finalized. Let's look at the number of them that have been reviewed. Let's look at the number of them in which the parties involved have participated and fully complied, and the number of people that are happy because we took those resolutions, we took those particular findings, and the members of the public were given reprieve or they're given justice. I'm certainly working as a public protector. I can't be a superhuman public protector that is not going to have any faults. And if I do have faults, you do have the faults which can be able to align me back into a path in which I'm supposed to walk into. So in terms of my capacity, in order to do work in terms of misconduct, I have not committed any such, and definitely I'm a professional in the way in which I'm doing things.
So for clarity's sake, with the public protector saying that the president's decision to initiate the process of her suspension, is unconstitutional, I mean, what do you then make of this? Is it really unconstitutional?
It's the public protector is incorrect in that particular process. Let's remember, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's section 194 or 193 of the Constitution simply states that the president does have the prerogative, his sole discretion of saying, I'm going to suspend the public protector up until a dark cloud has passed over your head. Now, the president does not need a reason for him to do that, but I think for procedural aspect and in compliance with section 33 of our Constitution, he simply says, before I take this particular decision, can you please give me submissions in which you are going to convince me that I shouldn't suspend you, that you are still going to be able to do your work as a public protector. This particular parliamentary inquiry which is taking place is not going to hinder you from doing your job. Let's remember, you are at the head of a Chapter 9 institution. Very important, and there are many individuals in South Africans that are looking at you so that they get reprieve at the end of the day. Can you give me comfort or a level of comfort that you're still going to be able to do your job? That is what the public protector was supposed to do. Now, to go to court and fight the powers which are written in black and white in the Constitution, I don't think she's going to be successful in that particular bid.
Okay, so with that said, in your opinion, how critical was the verdict from the Apex Court's ruling for the Committee for Section 195 inquiry to continue with this impeachment process? And I ask this because obviously there have been questions around the impartiality of those who are sitting on the Section 194 committee, perhaps even on what basis they will be assessing all of this in relation to the process. I mean, what's emerging on that front too?
It was very critical, but let's also remember as to what they came to court or asked the court. They basically the public protector came to court and said, is a procedure such as this one allowable? Can it be executed by the parliamentary committee? Then the court response was yes. If we look at the section that allows it to be removed, it does allow the end process, but it doesn't tell us how the procedure is going to be governed. Now, if the parliamentary process then starts, in which parliamentary then creates these rules, we have tested these rules. The only issue that we have with them is that you are not going to be allowed to bring in a legal representative of your choice, which is something which I think we think is not fair. We are going to remove that particular clause, but everything else remains as it is. Now, what I think should have happened from then onwards is that the process should start, and then if there are any issues with regards to impartiality or levels or alleged or biasness towards the people who are going to sit on that committee, the public protector should raise all those points there and then. Now, the public protector shouldn't stop the process from commencing. Let the process start, and once you are within that particular forum so that you are able to legitimize your concerns and all the issues that you may have, and then you raise it. Now, the first point in which you are going to raise, you are going to say, you are members of political parties. Yes, you have sworn in as members of the National Assembly, your allegiance is towards the Constitution, but I can't hide the fact that you are brought in Parliament by a political party. Your mandate is not only to South Africans, but you belong to a certain division of a political party. So if you assess my competence, if you assess whether I've been engaged in any misconduct proceedings, I must be given the assurance that you are doing so within a sober mind. So it would have been better if maybe it was a separate panel, which was, yes, you can consist of parliamentarians here and there, but there must be a small number of them. The majority of the people who are going to be there, they must be independent. The allegiance must only be to the court or to this particular process, so that you are able to excuse or to do away this level of biasness that might be perceived. Because if you have a parliamentary committee member who belongs from the EFF, from the DA, from the ANC, in which the public protector is found against, the public protector is going to come back and say, you know, there's nothing really wrong about me. You are just really bitter because I found against you in your municipality.
Well, Mpumelelo, you know, let's conclude this chat then, or this section of the chat, by perhaps looking at, at this rate. Do you think the public protector is actually going to complete a term as the public protector, which obviously comes to an end in 2023? And I ask this also because with Parliament being so adamant on the removal of public protector, I mean, there's obviously an impact on the institution itself. And I wonder, how this is going to impact the credibility of the Chapter 9 institution, given its predecessor and previous works at large as well.
I think she's going to complete the term, but under a very dark cloud. Maybe she'll complete the term being suspended, because I think this part of the parliamentary process is going to start anytime between now and maybe between June, but before the end of the year, the particular process is going to start. And then the suspension may come in if he then responds in an unsatisfactory manner towards the president. But what it does do, it does cast a cloud in terms of the workings of the head of the Chapter 9 institution. But in another sense, it provides an assurance to us as South Africans that we have a constitution and a rule of law which is able to self-cleanse, which is able to say, if you are a Chapter 9 institution, it's not that you are untouchable. You are also amenable and must do your job as per the Constitution would prescribe and any other applicable legislative process. And at the end of the day, you are going to be called back to account within that particular process if it is found wanting or there are any allegations that are there. What is most important, though, is that the parliamentarians and the public protector and all the other individuals that are there concerned, they must be able to show that this particular process of the cleansing process is procedural expert in the way in which it is conducted. It is able to provide an assurance to us that they are doing all that they can to make sure that it's done in the most fairest way. Justice is observed all the time. And what is important is that what is in the best interest of South Africans.
Right, Mpumelelo, let's leave that conversation there. I know there's one more case that we're going to be looking at. Obviously tomorrow, 8 years after Meyiwa was murdered. We know that the accused are back in court tomorrow. Are we likely to hear any new developments in the case regarding Senzo Meyiwa's murder?
I think it will purely depend upon the state. But I think once they are at this stage of saying that we are starting the trial, there's nothing new in which they're going to add. They can add maybe new accused along the way, but they're then going to say we are starting the trial on those bases, and this is how we are going to continue with things. I do have a bit of worry, though, when it comes to the circumstantial evidence in which they are moving towards. Maybe as a start, one would get to know as to the real motive of why they engaged in this particular activity. Was it a robbery gone wrong? Was it a hit? as it has been alleged in other quarters, but the evidence doesn't tie in. This particular case is going to be linked very much on circumstantial evidence, and it may be linked to a situation of saying, because the gun has been found in your possession, there's a certain link to the gun that shot and killed the Senzo Meyiwa. You are going to answer for all those sins unless you come up with a plausible explanation. I think they may have a problem with getting a conviction in some of the accused that are there, but there's something for me missing in this particular case when it comes to the investigation part. And maybe as the state starts to proceed with it and brings about a case and presents its case at court, they may start to bring all those puzzles together. But for now, it's a bit disjointed.
Well, but as those pieces of the puzzle, get put together, I wonder, 8 years later, I mean, it's still not clear who the real perpetrators are. And are we likely to see, an outcome of this anytime soon? I ask this also because, there's a documentary about who killed Senzo that's currently played out on one of the popular streaming services. And it's public opinion, of course, but I wonder if this is going to have any sway on influencing the case.
From a presiding officer's point of view, it shouldn't.
Okay.
The only evidence in which they are going to, or the all should assess, is the evidence which is presented at court. But what it does do when it comes to us as members of the public, it begs the question: aren't our policemen and or law enforcement officers, enforcement agencies, properly resourced to such an extent in which they'll be able to solve a case such as this one? Now, you have a number of witnesses which are in the room, a number of 4IR initiatives that you can do when it comes to the scanning of cell phones and other evidence that is there. Do we really not have enough processes or investigative powers and procedures to be able to solve this particular matter? What is so difficult about solving the case of Senzo Meyiwa? That's the one question in which South Africans will be wanting to ask. And they are hoping that during the presentation of this particular case in court, all those questions are going to be answered. But for now, I would say the NPA, the SABC, especially the investigating officers, are a bit in the back foot, and they would really need to work really hard to make sure that they're able to come back with a conviction on this case. Because if they don't, then their level of confidence, or the confidence in which South Africa has on them, is going to drop.
Let's leave the conversation there. Thank you very much for your time. Legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala again, just looking at some of the legal matters for the week ahead. Thank you very much for joining us here on the SABC. Let's take a quick ad break. We continue with more news and updates on the other side. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Let's continue with other news now, where Zulu Princess Thembi Zulu Ndlovu died at a hospital in Newcastle in KwaZulu-Natal last week, and she was the sister to the late AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini. Joining us to tell us a little bit more about some of the traditional and cultural proceedings that will be taking place, Professor Musa Xulu, who's the Executive Director of the Heritage Development Trust and founder of the Indonsa Yesizwe Foundation. Let's chat to him for that. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us here, Prof.
My sister, good afternoon. And to your viewers as well, the whole country, thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you for being part of the discussion. Let's get straight into it, Prof. There are certain words that are used when we speak, for example, about the king who will be planted. It wasn't deemed a burial. He wasn't going to be buried. And I wonder, in the case of Princess Thembi, is this also going to occur with her? Walk us through the context and narratives used in that process for her.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. What happens is this. Princess Thembi was married to the Ndlovu family in Newcastle, and they are not royalty. In terms of traditional Zulu rituals, that status goes away immediately when she went away immediately when she married to the Ndlovu. And therefore, her burial, the funeral has been advertised as a requiem mass. That's a Christian kind of funeral. So her funeral is going to be done in line with Christian traditions. of the Anglican Church. And that's going to be, according to the advert, in Newcastle, Matateni, on the 14th. So that part with the king, when he dies, he went to unite with the ancestors of the Zulu royal household. But the queen the princess was removed from that when she got married to the Ndlovu family. So when she passes on, if we are to use the Zulu religious system, when she passes on, she goes to meet with the ancestors of the Ndlovu family, not the ancestors of the Zulu royal household.
All right, Prof, thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. And, you know, as we lead up to the preparations for the coronation of the King, King Misizulu Kazwelethini, I mean, we know that Princess Thembi was not recognizing King Misizulu as the successor to the AmaZulu throne. And I wonder if this is going to, you know, likely create some issues as they prepare for her funeral.
No, it shouldn't. The funeral of Princess Thembi, who in normal English is Mrs. Ndlovu, is the responsibility of the Ndlovu family. The Zulu royal household comes in as relatives. They will be present. The king may decide to send some of the people there, because the king is head of the Zulu royal household, the head of the family. He may decide to send a delegation to go there. As a king, he can't attend a funeral, any funeral. So he would send a delegation to go there and represent the Zulu royal household. But they are not responsible for the nitty-gritties of the family. That is the responsibility of the Ndlovu family, where she is married. I think that the Ndlovu family has therefore decided that it's a Christian funeral. A Christian funeral is prescribed in the altar book of various mainline churches. So I believe that they are actually Anglicans, so it will be done in line with any other funeral of the Anglican Church.
All right, Prof, just in conclusion, very quickly, I mean, has a date been set as to when she's going to be laid to rest? And, you know, also as we look at the life and times of the princess, perhaps her influence, you know, what she stood for, also how she respected the throne at large, you know, lots of sentiments being echoed about her life and times. I mean, how will she be remembered? What does her legacy look like in some instances as well?
Two legacies. The first legacy is from the 1980s, when her husband was alive, and her husband was a businessman in Newcastle. She was very much actively involved with the traditional events and ceremonies of the Zulu royal household, and she was very close to the late king, who was her brother, very close. That legacy was almost tainted by what happened after the passing away of the late king, because suddenly there was all these unnecessary confusions in the Zulu royal household as to who should be the next king. And according to reports, and everybody knows, she was in the forefront, as you have said yourself, Lizelle, that she did not recognize King Misuzulu. But she did not have to recognize King Misuzulu, because a king is not a king because it's recognized by certain people and not by other people. It's irrelevant who recognizes him or who does not recognize him. He is born into a tradition that appoints him as a king, a custom. As the 2003 Act says, the royal family, what they had to do was to sit down and look at the customs of how kings are appointed in that situation. Now, the mother of the king, her lobola was paid by the Zulu nation. Every household, not all of them, but most households were asked to submit cattle or any other payment that could assist the king, the then king, to pay this lobola, which was huge, because the queen mother came from the Swazi royal family, and her father was King Sopuza. You can see how big that must have been. So that part, once an announcement is made that the nation must get involved in the payment of the lobola, we all know That the meaning of that is that the firstborn of that wife of that queen will be the next king. The second thing, of course, which gave King Misuzulu even more power and favor against the rest, is because he comes from a royal family. Now you have two royal families now. The Zulu royal family, that's the bloodline. And the Swazi royal family, that is the bloodline. You mix the two, you come up with a very powerful modern king. So King Misuzulu is not disputable. I don't know, because anybody disputing him would have to invent a custom. I don't know where they would get it from. But I thought that maybe last week, Saturday, when we went to Newcastle for the Umembeso ceremony, when Sister Tembi pitched up, it looked like there was a spirit of reconciliation. But in that same evening, she wrote a letter that she still does not recognize King Misuzulu. So many people who had been celebrating seeing her on the pictures on SABC everywhere during the day became disappointed when she issued a statement in the evening. That's that kind of legacy, I think, is a little bit on the dark side of things. But the earlier legacy, she could be remembered with that as well. But unfortunately, depends on which religious system you use. She'll be buried as a Christian. Yes. And in the Christian faith, what you do at last is what matters.
Right, Prof, thank you very much for giving us that context as well. Again, Professor Musa Xulu, the Executive Director of the Heritage Development Trust and founder of Indonsa Yesizwe. You know, chatting about the upcoming preparations, this comes after the passing of the Zulu Princess Thembi Zulu Ndlovu, who died at a hospital in Newcastle in KwaZulu-Natal last week. She was the sister to the late AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini. Again, thank you very much, Prof, for your time. Let's take a quick ad break. We continue with more news on the other side. Welcome back. More news on the week ahead. Organised agriculture in KwaZulu-Natal fears that food security and economic growth are at risk if rural infrastructure isn't improved urgently. A comprehensive survey by the KwaZulu-Natal Agricultural Union, KwaNalu, has shown that 3 out of 4 farmers experience poor conditions on roads in rural areas which are used for transporting their products daily. And only half of the farmers say that roads are being repaired, but most of the repairs were inadequate. Now, this finding forms part of a national survey which showed that this is a crisis affecting the agricultural sector countrywide.
The Crichton region is the heart of the province's dairy farming area. More than 20% of the country's milk is produced here. About 500,000 litres of milk are transported in this area on roads such as this every day. But it's roads with poor surfaces, sinkholes and potholes. Farmers and other road users say they risk their lives daily. There have been multiple accidents. 50-ton milk tankers have skidded off the roads, trucks have overturned and vehicles were damaged. The cost to farmers and the rural community is mounting. This busy rural road has completely collapsed in certain sections. Some farmers have tried to do their own repairs at an estimated cost of 200,000 rands.
It's having a huge financial impact on our businesses, on logistics, on transport companies unwilling to come here, price increases due to increased repairs and maintenance. The socio-economic impact is even probably greater, because we have a huge mass of local communities around us that rely on all of these farms for jobs and job security, and they're struggling to get to work. They're struggling their taxi fares are increasing for the same reasons. The taxi owners are incurring huge costs.
He says, I use this road daily, sometimes at night as well. So using this road is extremely dangerous to all road users. You need to be on high alert because there are huge potholes. The road is in a poor state. Sometimes it narrows down and 2 cars are unable to use it. Farmers in all agricultural sectors, emerging, big and small, are affected.
The poor road conditions on farmers it caused a negative impact, more especially on small-scale farmers. When they're supposed to transport their produce from the farm to the marketplace, it becomes difficult. It must be remembered that our smallholder farmers, they don't have big machinery, they don't have 4x4s.
The union has called for urgent intervention by all spheres of government.
Port Hollywood wish to see some solid engagement taking place, some sound interventions by both municipalities and the department. Some of those interventions, yes, will include obviously higher level conversations, but more importantly, those local level conversations that need to take place. Because let's be frank, at the end of the day, the producers that are producing in those local areas know just what their needs are. And if we need to ensure food security in this country, we will need to address our rural infrastructure.
In response, the provincial government said it took note of the concerns raised and said it remained committed to road infrastructure maintenance.
We are also requesting that the private farmers who have got means to work with us so that we collaborate in making sure that we are able to fix expeditedly those projects that are essential for the movement of goods and also for the movement of the agricultural produce.
Agri-SA says it will present the findings of the survey to the presidency and called on government to address this issue as a matter of urgency. Renee Heine, SABC News, Crichton.
All right, let's take a look at another story for the week ahead. A deadline has passed in Pakistan for candidates to put their names forward to succeed Imran Khan, who was ousted as Prime Minister in a no-confidence vote. The parliament vote came after he was deserted by coalition partners who blame him for a crumbling economy and failure to deliver on his campaign promises. Now, on this question of what led to the vote of no confidence, this is what the SABC News correspondent Ishan Garg had to say. Take a listen.
This has been building up for a very long time. There has been widespread, dissatisfaction among the Pakistani public, especially after the pandemic. As the economy started to, reel back from the inflationary shock, there was widespread price rises, and people also complained about how the Imran Khan government mishandled the economic performance of Pakistan. And there has also been rising criticism of Pakistan's foreign policy. Under Imran Khan, Pakistan has grown closer to Russia and China and has tried to shun away the United States of America to a very large degree, and that's a prospect not many Pakistanis are very fond of. So this has been in the making for the past few months, and the nail in the coffin really has been since the opposition party leader Mr. Shahbaz Sharif, he put in the vote of no confidence against Imran Khan, saying that Imran Khan wasn't really able to handle neither the economic performance nor the foreign policy performance, and therefore today we are seeing that Imran Khan has been ousted as the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
All right, we're going to invite SABC International editor Sophie Mukwena to join in on this conversation as we look at some of the international stories on the International Diary. A very good afternoon to you, Sophie. Thank you for joining us again.
Good day, and good day to the listeners, to the viewers.
Let's get into some of the stories that obviously is coming through on the back of the ousting of the Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan. I wonder if you could perhaps, after contextualizing, this no confidence vote that got him ousted in the early hours of Sunday morning, I wonder if, after contextualizing this, we can look where to from here. We understand Pakistan's geographic location, and perhaps how this is going to impact not only the country, but also the surrounding countries and its allegiances to some of the more dominant players in the world, given what is transpiring in that region.
Yes, we know that last week there was supposed to be this convening of parliament and perhaps voting on this motion of no confidence against the Prime Minister of Pakistan. But the matter was not put before Parliament. And yesterday, the matter was put before Parliament by the opposition in that country. And unfortunately, there was a fallout within Imran Khan's support base. And some of them did vote with the opposition, and he was kicked out as the head of government in that country. We know that there are challenges in that country in terms of security, the constant the tension between India and Pakistan on Kashmir. Now you know that at the moment, many people are saying perhaps the new incoming Prime Minister will try and strengthen the relations with neighbors, including India. But also, we know that the former Prime Minister has since blamed foreign forces, saying that they have meddled in the affairs of Pakistan, and there's interest from international community, some countries or foreign forces, because they want him to follow what they are saying. We know that a few weeks ago he visited Russia and pledged his support to President Vladimir Putin, and he was not so popular or was not in favor of strong relations with the United States of America. And some people are saying for that reason there could have been some interference. But of course, those countries that he suspects that they were involved, or the foreign forces, they will deny this.
Oh, voting in France is also currently underway. President Emmanuel Macron is facing tough oppositions. Perhaps early on, we also spoke to SABC News correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris and asked him about the turnout at the voting stations. Let's take a listen before we bring you back into the conversation.
Polling has been going on now for voting that gets underway in mainland France, but voters living overseas, expats working abroad, have been able to cast their ballots on Saturday. Also, voters in France's overseas regions of Guadeloupe and Martinique, for example, in the Caribbean, voted on Saturday. We did see some low turnout numbers, actually, when you were looking at the data from Saturday, but today, election monitors really hoping that there won't be this issue of abstentionism, people turning out to vote. Some people had answered pre-election surveys saying that they were minded to stay at home this election. There are 12 candidates on the ballot paper at election booths like the one you can see behind me. That's just a primary school here in central Paris. 12 candidates on the ballot paper. All 12 of them are trying to get through to the second round. Today is the first round. If you finish in the top two in the first round, you can progress to the runoff in 2 weeks' time.
All right, Sophie, let's bring you back into the conversation as we shine a spotlight on France's presidential election. I mean, obviously, the French are going to be choosing their president in April, and it serves as a crucial time for France, given its impact that this is going to have not only on the country, but on Europe at large. We obviously understand Macron has had, huge control on both domestic, but also foreign policy. And, it's quite influential in the European Union as an influential member there. And I wonder, is President Emmanuel Macron favored to win? How tight is the race as they edge closer, perhaps looking at his main challenger, far right-winger Marine Le Pen?
In terms of the polls, it is clear that the current president, Emmanuel Macron, will go to the second round.
Okay.
His challenger, that is Marine Le Pen, is also doing well, and we know that because of the internal problems of France, there are those who believe that she is going to perform better compared to last elections, because there are serious challenges of issues that are related to poverty and also food supply due to war in Ukraine. And also we know that there were challenges in terms of supplies during the COVID-19. The other issue is around climate. People really looking forward to a better leadership on this regard. And also the issue of the war in Ukraine. Clearly, the performance of Emmanuel Macron, you saw him constantly in touch with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, trying to broker peace between the Russians and the Ukrainians. But unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet. But he has been involved. He's the person who can take a call and speak to Putin. He can also speak to the president of Ukraine in the same way. And therefore, he was positioning himself as a super diplomat in the European region or in the European Union. And we know that earlier on, the region used to rely on the former Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, who was always giving direction, particularly at the crucial time when the United States of America was found wanting under the former president, Donald Trump. But since then, America is working hard to reposition itself as a senior voice or an alternative voice, or the voice of the West, but also the voice that is dominant on world stage. And therefore Macron was also trying to be exactly that. And you look at also when the issue of COVID-19 pandemic started, he did the same, trying to pull all leaders within the G7, but also European Union and around the world, the G20. You'd recall him visiting South Africa, making pledges in terms of assisting South Africa on the fight against COVID-19 and building infrastructure and capacity in terms of manufacturing of vaccines and therapeutics for COVID-19. And therefore, he wanted to be this world leader. But back at home, there were lots and lots of challenges. Who can forget the Yellow Jacket protests every week, very violent and brutal. And also during the COVID-19, him imposing very tough measures, and some people rising against those measures. But the Ukraine war assisted him to turn the situation around in terms of support in his country, because people are worried about the war in Ukraine, and they saw him as a person trying to resolve this. And you can see even his body language in these meetings, all these multilateral forums. When you look at him during the meeting of NATO recently in Brussels, you could see that he was interacting with all these leaders, trying to really cement himself. Because when you contest elections in any country as a sitting head of state or head of government, you want to always be seen in public doing something, not only local or in your country, but in your region and international. Because those pictures, people seeing you every day, being engaged on issues and all of that, they can turn your fortunes around. And perhaps those people who had lost hope in you may rethink their position. And that's exactly what happened. The Russia-Ukraine war did position him as a strong voice in the European Union, but also in the NATO, the G7, the G20, and also him reaching out to African leaders, recently announcing and accepting that the French troops must withdraw from Mali. And therefore you could see that he was trying to project himself as a senior leader, alternative voice around the globe. And this emanating from the fact that some few years ago, the U.S. was really found wanting. And Angela Merkel stepped in, and they had good relations with Macron. And Macron, realizing that Angela Merkel is leaving, he continued to try and position himself as a voice of reason. And this can perhaps work in his favor. But who knows? Elections are elections. The voters will decide.
Absolutely. And staying with the elections in France, earlier on the agenda, our sister program, SABC News correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris, spoke about the main deciding issues and the key factors in this elections. This is how it went.
Well, there are three key issues. The climate emergency is always one that tops voters' concerns, but we have seen two issues that have become more prominent, especially over the last 6 months now. They are purchasing power and also the cost of living crisis. So Marine Le Pen, the right-wing nationalist who's trying to challenge Emmanuel Macron to take the presidency, she has spent the last 6 months travelling across France, particularly focusing on the cost of living crisis, and her response to that price crunch. Also, we have seen the war in Ukraine. That has also had an impact on voters' concerns. Emmanuel Macron did manage to get a boost in March with what's known as a rally round the flag effect, when the voters prefer stability rather than a possible change of leader. He got a boost, but Marine Le Pen has been whittling away that lead, and now we do understand that according to pre-election polls, the difference between Marine Le Pen, the second favourite, and Emmanuel Macron, the incumbent president, is only 2 or 3 percentage points. So really, that huge lead that Emmanuel Macron had, due to the boost from the wartime diplomat role he was playing during the war in Ukraine, the early days, the first 4 or 5 weeks of the conflict, he had a boost, but that has been reduced by Marine Le Pen in the last couple of days heading into today's election.
All right, so on the back of that, Sophie, I want to bring you back into the conversation as we conclude this international outlook for the week ahead, and looking at, news emerging about a possible ceasefire. This is talks are underway in relation to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. I mean, Russia coming out to say that the de-escalation is not a ceasefire. It's just that the talks, in fact, have a long way to go. And I wonder how you can contextualize and give us more updates on that, perhaps also looking at the power dynamics and how it's going to impact the geopolitics across the globe.
Well, we are told, and there are reports, that the meeting between the president of Ukraine and the president of Russia is imminent. But all the time you get this glimmer of hope, but it doesn't translate into action. And recently, just 4 days ago, the UN aid chief indicated that he is not optimistic that the ceasefire is going to happen very soon. And we know that even at the Security Council meeting last week, there was no agreement. And then, of course, the General Assembly voting to suspend Russia at the Human Rights Commission in Geneva. That has made Russia to take a tough stand again, and hardening of position. And it is on that note that I think ceasefire, I can't see it happening now, but it will happen. We had President Cyril Ramaphosa saying that in his conversation with the President of the United States of America on a telephone on Friday, this is the issue that they discussed, South Africa's position and South Africa's view, and the President saying that they will continue to push for this ceasefire, but also for dialogue to continue. Now, everybody is trying to push where they have where he or she has influence between the two sides to ensure that there's this ceasefire, but also the dialogue. I mean, we've been talking about these talks for the last 4 weeks, and nothing is happening. And it is still at the technocrat level. It has one meeting of the politicians, the foreign affairs minister, and there was that glimmer of hope that from there it will be heads of state. But the foreign affairs minister recently haven't met, and you still have only diplomatic shuttling between the technocrats, and therefore it doesn't take us anywhere. And I can't see it happening now. You had a report from Stuart Smith in Moscow saying that now the financial ministers or ministers of finance of BRICS nations have met, and Russia is proposing that the BRICS group must be independent from the monetary system of the world, that is the dollar, so that they can have a powerful position to negotiate. So you can see that Russia is pushing the world to be ready and accept that this standoff is not going to help, and they must find alternatives to accept the implication of this war in Ukraine, and that Russia itself is working towards finding a alternative way to cope with the current situation. You know that he did announce that whoever wants to buy gas and oil from Russia, they'll have to use rubles. You can see, I don't know, but let's hope a miracle will happen, and perhaps in a few days to come we can talk about ceasefire.
Let's continue to monitor that situation, but we'll leave the conversation there. SABC International Editor Sophie Mukwena giving us the latest on the international diary. And just like that, that's where we're going to leave the show for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. For myself, Liesl Wilson, and the rest of the Week Ahead team, it is goodbye for now. Have a good week. Stay safe and see you next week. Goodbye for now.